Before you say yes, have an honest and transparent conversation about everything to do with your finances and your partner's finances.
Before you say yes, I would say to people, stop and think about what you want, what it is that you deserve, and make sure that you're protected.
I'm Catherine Fitzpatrick, former senior bank executive, now working with companies, governments and regulators around the world to change the way financial products are designed. This podcast is about financial consent, what to check, what to ask before you share your money, your accounts and your digital life with someone you love. So before you say yes to getting into debt with someone else, listen to this. Most of us have signed up for debt at some stage in our life: a credit card, a car loan, a buy now, pay later account, a mortgage. When we sign up on our own, it's straightforward because we're responsible for paying it back. But have you ever stopped to think about what shared debt actually means and who's responsible for it if your relationship ends or your circumstances change? David Koch, Kochie to most of us, has been helping Australians make sense of their money for decades. He's a financial commentator. He's been married to Lib for 47 years. He's a dad of 4 and a grandfather of 10. Most couples end up sharing money, a joint account. They might have a mortgage. They might have a car together. But they don't always think about it or talk about it together before they fall into it. So I'm really interested.
It's not very romantic, is it, to talk about money when you're in love with somebody and all of that, but it's a question you got to have.
Yeah, but how do we make it romantic?
Okay. It's all about getting life in order before you get into a long-term relationship, and particularly if you're going to share financial commitments and things like that, and you've got to talk about it. I reckon because you're a team. You're a team in life, you're a team in finance, you're a team in love, and with money, you've got to work as a team, always. And I always say to people, once a month, spend 15 minutes, I call it Love Money. It's a love money session where you love your money. And you sit down. It's only half an episode of Home and Away. So in the overall scheme of things, there's not a lot of time. Liv and I usually get cheese and biscuits. I open a bottle of red and inevitably it lasts longer than 15 minutes. But just talk about your money. Not going through credit card statements and going, why'd you buy this? Why'd you buy that? It is, hey, anything worrying you? Anything that you need to know. So
how do you step into that conversation if it feels uncomfortable at first?
Look, I think it's almost, you're compatible in love, interests, friends, that sort of stuff. It's almost putting it in that bucket and saying, okay, let's talk about, are we compatible financially? Are you a good saver or are you a spender? Those little things can, after a while, irritate you if you're not on the same page or you're not aware. Oh, can't believe they go shopping for this and that. Well, the other partner just loves to see their account balance go up in their savings account. Got to talk about those sort of things, because breakups, divorces, 50% of them are because of financial stress or financial incompatibility. And so right from the very start, you got to just, in a fun way, cheese and crackers, glass of wine. Oh, you saver, or what do? Do you set yourself financial goals? And I've got a lead as one partner if you want to open the subject. Oh, I love to save. This is my financial goal. And just ease into it rather than say, do you have any credit card debt? How many credit cards you have? That comes further down the line. But the icebreaker is, oh, what are your goals? But any little warning flags of money that disappears, or they want to control their money very secretively, or worst case is they want to then control yours because you're a team. They're real red flags for me. Everyone's just got to be so transparent. There should be no money issue at all that shouldn't be talked about. And if an answer comes back, oh, don't you trust me? Well, then you've got to be thinking in your own mind, well, maybe I shouldn't. Don't you love me? Don't you trust me? It's not about that. It's about being honest and protecting yourself.
The red flags Kochie describes rarely announce themselves. We often fall into financial arrangements at the start of a relationship when we're madly in love, even when our spidey senses are tingling. Simone Weston is an executive leader, keynote speaker, and women's advocate that has survived domestic violence and financial abuse.
I had set myself up with safeguards, or so I thought, around the banking. But prior to coming into our relationship, a credit card existed that he had as part of his family. They had, different account holders. And when we got into our relationship, I had the safeguards around the banks, but he said to me, it makes sense for us to put it on that card because we get all these amazing benefits from it. And at the time, my body said no. I didn't like it. I didn't like that I didn't have my own account. I like my own card. And I asked to get my own card and it was like, no, you can't do that. And so in the beginning, I was getting the statements and he was paying the bills, and it's kind of like that visibility versus control gap. I didn't notice the gap until the relationship deteriorated, and then he stopped giving me the statements. For a woman who thought she was going into it quite intelligently and protected, that one decision cost me everything. And I lost visibility, I lost control of where the money was going, and he had complete control. We got some financial advice and they were asking questions that I'd been really curious about for a long time because I didn't have visibility. And so when you don't have visibility, the story to me was, we need to be really financially prudent. There isn't a lot of money. You need to not spend. And so I wasn't really living much of a life. And then when we had this conversation, I realized he was living like a king and I was living like a pauper.
You speak about power and you teach people about power. What do you mean when you say structural power?
Every system, like the banks, the telcos, the energy providers, have been set up and structured to have a named authority on the account. If you are the named account holder, you have structural power, you have power in that system. And so you can call them, you can ask questions, you can make changes, you can act. If you are not the authorised account holder, even if you use it every single day, your life runs through it, you don't exist. You have zero power in that system. And so why this matters is, well, in a healthy relationship, it doesn't necessarily, but the person whose name on the account holds the power. And so if they choose to use it against you, they can block you, they can freeze you, they have control. And so they can really use it against you. In a healthy relationship, you don't notice it. But a system, structural power, doesn't know if a relationship is healthy or not. It just cares about the named account holder. And that's why it is so important for people to understand the structural power, the system's power, but particularly in this context, their name that is on the accounts, because it will either give them permission to act or not.
When did you come to an understanding about that structural power?
When it was too late, when I realized I don't exist in the system. And so I found myself in a position where I was like, I'm really educated and I thought I was going into it eyes wide open. I really wasn't as blind to this as some people are, but I actually was around structural power.
This deceit is what Kochie calls financial infidelity.
You're cheating. If you've got secret credit cards that only you know about or debts that only you know about, then you've got to declare it. And particularly in this day and age of going to the bank of mum and dad, if you want to get help getting into property, I always say to mum and dad, be a bank. Never give the money, lend the money, because if your child's partner walks out, I'd rather them walk out with half of a debt to me than half an asset that they're just got to take away. So it is a big responsibility, and you'll be amazed, absolutely amazed, how many people fall for the traps and find themselves in all sorts of problems.
We hear the term joint account all the time, and you've talked about that, but what do people think it means, and what does it actually mean?
Okay, I think joint accounts, joint loans, the whole thing, everybody goes, oh, it's joint, it's fair. I'm responsible or am entitled to 50% of the joint savings account, or I'm responsible for half the joint debt on a credit card or a mortgage. But what it really means is, no, you are responsible for the entire debt if your partner walks out and won't pay their share. And with your joint savings account, you are responsible for the entire balance as your partner is. Now, in a joint savings account, your partner's just not limited to taking out their half of the joint. They're entitled to take the whole lot. And there have been lots of stories where a partner has walked out and said, see you later, and the other partner has gone to their joint savings account and it has been cleaned out.
Yeah.
Joint is you.
This is going into what I've been calling my feminerd territory, because I love reading terms and conditions.
Catherine, you are a very special person if you love reading terms and conditions.
I know, it's really
You're
boring.
a nerd.
I am a nerd. I like to say I'm a feminerd. I think there's a hashtag. But I've been trying to explain to people, if you take a look, say, in your mortgage or any other account where there's a debt, there's that expression joint and several liability, and it's exactly like you've talked about. It doesn't mean you're only on the hook for 50%. You're actually on the hook for the whole 100%. Why do you think people don't quite understand that? Is it the banks are not telling us enough about it, or is it we go in a little bit blindly?
I think we go in a bit blindly. Reading terms and conditions is
boring.
Boring and can take a fair bit of time. They should be advised with the lender, and the lender often says you need to get your own independent advice to each of the borrowers. I reckon that rarely ever happens. Now with AI, and if you subscribe to Claude or one of those, you can put the terms and conditions into Claude and say, what do I need to watch out for in these terms and conditions? And Claude very quickly puts it through. So I think AI is going to be an absolute boom for financial literacy and risk management in financials. But you've got to be aware of all. A lot of people say to me, I have this saying, you can delegate some financial responsibility to the other member of the team. Like I delegate the household budget to Lib, but you can never surrender responsibility. You've always got to be aware there is no excuse. None of this, I find it too complicated, I'm not interested, it takes too much time, whatever. I don't care. It's your money. You've got to spend a bit of time looking at it and understanding what you're in for, because it will pay off into the future.
And then what about as you're moving through life and you've got some of those other things that are happening? We don't always talk also about the things that might go wrong. So when you're doing the planning, so you're walking in, it's all hunky-dory, but what about when life happens?
And life does happen, and particularly if you're part of a small business. That's another layer and of responsibility. Like I've had family businesses, virtually Libs and my whole married life. And it is, if you're a director of a small business, if you're in a relationship with a tradie or married to a tradie, or and you're a director of their small business. It is understanding your responsibilities there. Now, the golden rule is you never sign anything. Never sign anything until you understand it and it's explained to you. Never. If you're in a relationship where, and I know it can be really easy because life's very busy for everyone. Hey, can you just sign this for the accountant? Well, no, you stop. Even though you're busy, you stop and go, no, I'm not going to sign it now. Let's set that aside where in tonight or in 2 days' time, or when we catch up for our monthly, talking about money, you explain to me what I'm signing here.
Yeah.
And leave the document with me so I can read it and let's talk about it. And you tell me why it's so important. I need. And no, it could be an asset document. It could be anything. It could be administrative, bureaucratic. And the answer's pretty simple to give you. But it could be something different as well.
Yeah.
It could be, hey, your guarantee for an overdraft that we're going in for the bank, understanding what that means.
Sue Fraser has spent more than 30 years as a financial counsellor. She has sat across from people when the emotional realities of relationships collide with the fine print. And she'll tell you most of them didn't see it coming, not because they weren't paying attention, but because nobody told them what they'd actually agreed to.
I mean, I used to see lots of young people going into mortgages or even for guarantors for other people in terms of money, and they almost always end in disaster because they didn't understand the consequence of what it was that they were signing. No one believes that they could lose their own house because they guaranteed someone else's loan. But if that was explained to them in an honest and open way, then you might have a different conversation and you might decide not to proceed.
And I've had a lot of conversations with people about, so this contract could be joint and several liability. Do you know what that means? And most people think it means, oh, it's a 50-50 loan. Tell me, what is joint and several liability? And tell me some other areas that we should be looking for as well and understanding what is that legal construct.
Yeah. If someone has a contract that's where it's jointly and severally liable, it means that if they can't get the money from me, they'll get it from you. So that if I'm out of the picture, 100% of that debt will come to you and you'll be pursued for that.
If people are starting to move in together, they're starting to share bills, sign a lease, open a joint account, maybe even start thinking about saving for really big expenses like a car or a home, what are they really agreeing to, whether they realise it or not?
They're usually not agreeing to much in a voluntary informed capacity. You know, someone will have a credit card or get a credit card and there'll be a second card off that, but not understanding the financial and legal obligations that sit with it. When we buy a car together or when we buy a home together, you know, how that contract's structured is really important. And most people buy as joint owners. Some younger people are now buying as tenants in common, which mean that if we have a house together and I conk out, my half can be willed to whoever I want it to be. Now, that might create a problem for you if I leave my half to someone who you might not get on with or don't think that's appropriate. But they're the discussions that need to happen. It's about how do we protect ourselves, but how do we protect each other? It's not always a one-way street. It's about being really clear about what it is that we've agreed to and understanding what the ramifications are.
Kochie's been talking about this for a long time. In 2004, he wrote a book with his wife, Lib, about money and relationships. What would you say if you were going to write the book now, instead of it being the 10 things you do before you get emotional after they leave, what about the 10 things you do as you're right in the throes of emotion?
Yeah. Or the 10 things you do when you're about to commit to a long-term relationship.
Yeah. What would be on that list?
Oh, it would be having the conversation. It would be setting the ground rules of how our money is going to be managed. It might be a joint account where, and kick off in the early stages of a relationship while you're building that trust, because you really don't know someone unless you've lived with them for a fair amount of time, I don't think. Because the romance the short-term romance will go, and you become friends and you become partners and you become a team. That's a big step forward, and that's where you get to really know the person going forward. So it is, okay, how do we sort out our banking? How do we sort out the income we both earn? How do we divvy it up? What are the financial goals? What are each of our responsibilities in terms of managing different parts of the household budget or our financial relationship, and getting that all done quickly? Our estate planning, what are we going to do with wills? Insurances, do we add each other as beneficiaries? Do you become my designated beneficiary on my super? Today, that's a big commitment. That's a big sign of a relationship. So it's all of those issues I think you need to discuss. And that's just part of having a healthy relationship. It shouldn't be intimidating.
So I think what I'm really taking away from this conversation is eyes wide open.
Yep.
And the curiosity to have the conversation together.
And you're not loving your partner. You're not distrusting them. And they shouldn't take it that way either. It is, you want to satisfy yourself. You want to understand what you want to be involved in the financial side of the relationship. And you should be, because it's your money. It's your commitment. It's your risk in terms of any loans that you might have. And that's just part of a healthy relationship. People that say to me, I'm really uncomfortable talking about it. Why? We'll talk about our family. We talk about our sex lives with each other. All that. Why can't you talk about money? It's just part of life. It's part of a relationship. So, but everyone goes this taboo thing, I don't want to upset anybody or think that I don't trust them. No, you're just protecting yourself.
So what about when the team does it really well? How does that feel?
I know. We've been sounding very serious, haven't we, with all of the pitfalls you've got to watch out for. But if you're working well as a team financially, it's just a wonderful experience. So all that financial stress lifts off your shoulders because you're talking to someone about it. You're sharing issues. You're sharing goals. You're achieving goals because you're on the same financial page. So it can be a wonderful, liberating experience when you get it right. And so many people do.
My takeaway from Kochie, Simone and Sue. Debt you share isn't half-half. Joint doesn't mean your home loan is split down the middle. The law doesn't see halves, and when you're madly in love at the start of a relationship, you might not either. So before you say yes to sharing debt with someone, do this. Understand what joint actually means. Joint doesn't always mean equal. On a loan with joint and several liability, the most common lending to consumers, you're not on the hook for half. You're on the hook for all of it. If your partner stops paying or walks away, the lender can come to you for the entire debt plus interest. And a joint savings account works the same way in reverse. Either of you can withdraw the whole balance anytime without the other's permission. There are plenty of stories of an account being emptied the day a relationship ended. Know which accounts you're on and what that exposes you to. There's a difference between the asset and the debt. They're two different legal questions. Joint tenants and tenants in common are about the asset. Who owns what share of the property and what can happen to it? You can choose this. Joint and several liability is about the debt. Who's on the hook if it doesn't get paid? And there are other debt structures too where liability is split differently. They're more commonly used in business. You should check which structure applies and what it means for you personally. Have visibility always. Make sure statements and account communications come directly to you as well as your partner. You can delegate the day-to-day management of your finances, but don't surrender responsibility. It's too complicated is not a reason to look away. It's your money, it's your risk. Never sign anything until you understand it. Not for an accountant, not for a lender, not for a partner, not for anyone who says it's urgent. Just stop. Ask what you're signing, ask for the document, read it, and if it can't be explained to you clearly, that's a reason to pause, not to hurry up. Understand what guarantor really means before you agree to it. If you guarantee someone else's loan, including your child's mortgage, you could be made to repay the whole loan if they don't. And if you've put up your own home as the security, the lender can sell it to recover the debt. When your next joint statement lands in your inbox or your mailbox, stop and ask yourself the question, do I still know what I've agreed to? Because love shouldn't cost you freedom.